Hello, everyone, and thanks for choosing to spend some time with me here on. Pardon me. Oh, I forgot my tea. Oh well, I'll have to make do without it. I don't feel like getting up. Anyway, thank you for choosing to spend some time with me here on the channel. We're gonna do a spooky story today. Thank you to it's either DR Animations or Doctor Animations. I'm not sure which is the correct interpretation of your username. Quiet, Java. Go away. I am not sure which is the correct interpretation of your username, but whoever you are, thank you for suggesting the story that I'm going to read today, The Ebony Frame by Edith Nesbit, who we have encountered on this channel before. I'm going to do half of it today. It's not a long story, but I think I'm going to start trying to do sort of shorter chunks as an incentive to record more often, quite frankly. So thank you to DR Animations for suggesting The Ebony Frame by Edith Nesbit. We'll do the first half today and then the second half when I get a chance. So before we get into it, just the usual notes for this channel, which is that these stories... Sorry, I'm just checking to make sure everything's recording properly. Looks like we're good. These stories are Victorian / Edwardian ghost stories, so 19th and early 20th century, and as such may contain period typical attitudes about things like race and gender and religion and orientation and anything you can think of that is quite rightly distasteful to modern people. And if that's not your cup of tea, then feel free to bow out of the video now and not consume the content. The same goes for just the spooky stories in general. They often, as spooky stories do, they often have unpleasant circumstances happening in them, or that are the focus of the story. So murders, suicides, whatever you can think of are often the case in these stories. And again, if that's not your cup of tea, feel free to bow out now. So, as usual, this will be me reading aloud and making comments throughout, because sometimes I cannot help myself. And again, if you don't like that, you can find the story yourself online for free, which is what I have done. So, with all that out of the way, welcome. And here we go with The Ebony Frame by Edith Nesbit. To be rich is a luxurious sensation. Wouldn't know, not familiar with it, but probably. The more so when you have plumbed the depths of hard-upness as a Fleet Street hack. A picker-up of unconsidered pars, a reporter, an unappreciated journalist, all callings utterly inconsistent with one's family feeling and one's direct descent from the Dukes of Picardy. Picardy? I don't know. I'm inclined to say Picardy, but only because of Star Trek. Either way, I mean, I'm sure we've all felt unappreciated or underappreciated in our work. When my Aunt Dorcas, there's a name you don't see often anymore, died and left me $700 a year and a furnished house in Chelsea, bloody cat hair, I felt that life had nothing left to offer except immediate possession of the legacy. Even Mildred Mayhew, whom I had hereto regarded as my life's light, became less luminous. Well, fuck you too, buddy. I was not engaged to Mildred, yeah, good for her, but I lodged with her mother, and I sang duets with Mildred and gave her gloves when it would run to it, which was seldom. She was a dear, good girl, and I meant to marry her some day. It is very nice to feel that a good little woman... Oh, no, I also apologize for my misspeaking, which I'm already doing quite a bit. It is very nice to feel that a good little woman is thinking of you. It helps you in your work, and it is pleasant to know that she will say yes when you say, will you? I mean, it sounds like you don't really like Mildred specifically. You just like the idea of a woman around the house. I don't like this guy. But my legacy almost put Mildred out of my head. Shocker. Especially as she was staying with friends in the country. Before the gloss was off my new mourning, I was seated in my aunt's armchair in front of the fire in the drawing room of my own house. My own house. It was grand, but rather lonely. I did think of Mildred just then. I mean, it's probably the only way myself or anyone my generation's going to get a house is if someone dies. The room was comfortably furnished with rosewood and damask. On the walls hung a few fairly good oil paintings, but the space above the mantelpiece was disfigured by an exceedingly bad print, The Trial of Lord William Russell, framed in a dark frame. I got up to look at it. I had visited my aunt with dutiful regularity, but I never remembered seeing this frame before. It was not intended for a print, but for an oil painting. It was of fine ebony, beautifully and curiously carved. I looked at it with growing interest, and when my aunt's housemaid, I had retained her modest staff of servants, came in with the lamp, I asked her how long the print had been there. Mistress only bought it 2 days before she was took ill, she said. But the frame? She didn't want to buy a new one, so she got this out of the attic. There's lots of curious old things there, sir. Had my aunt had this frame long? Oh, yes, sir. It must have come long before I did, and I've been here 7 years come Christmas. There was a picture in it. That's upstairs, too. But it's that black and ugly, it might as well be a chimney back. Well, you can get those sorts of things cleaned, like it's not out of the question. I felt a desire to see this picture. What if it were some priceless old master in which my eyes had only seemed rubbish? I don't know, Bud. I think maybe you've used up your luck on inheriting the house and the money. Let's not push our luck for a hereto undiscovered master's painting. Directly after breakfast next morning, I paid a visit to the attic. It was crammed with old furniture, enough to stock a curiosity shop. All the house was furnished solidly in the mid-Victorian style, and in this room everything not keeping with the drawing room suite ideal was stowed away. Tables of papier-mâché and mother-of-pearl, straight-backed chairs with twisted feet, and faded needlework cushions, fire screens of gilded carving and beaded banners, oak bureau with brass handles, a little work table with its faded, moth-eaten silk flutings hanging in disconsolate shreds. On these, and the dust that covered them, blazed the full daylight as I pulled up the blinds. That actually sounds like a really cool room full of really cool stuff. I promised myself a good time in re-enshrining these household goods in my parlor and promoting the Victorian suite to the attic. But at present my business was to find the picture as black as the chimney back, and presently, behind a heap of fenders and boxes, I found it. Jane, the housemaid, identified it at once. I took it downstairs carefully and examined it. Neither subject nor color was distinguishable. There was a splotch of darker tint in the middle, but whether it was figure or tree or house, no man could have told. It seemed to be painted on a very thick panel bound with leather. That sounds weird. I've never heard of a painting being done like that. I decided to send it to one of those persons who pour on rotting family portraits the water of eternal youth. But even as I did so, I thought, why not try my own restorative hand at a corner of it? Well, because if it is an undiscovered master, you're probably going to wreck it. Maybe art restoration, maybe leave that to the professionals there. I'm just going to put that out there. My bath soap sponge and nail brush. Oh God, don't do that. Never take an old piece of art and go at it with a fucking nail brush. Do not do that. You will screw it up unless you are a professional. Stop it. Don't do that. Put the nail brush down. My bath sponge and nail brush, vigorously applied for a few seconds, showed me that there was no picture to clean. Oh, good, he's not wrecking anything. Bare oak presented itself to my persevering brush. I tried the other side, Jane watching me with indulgent interest. The same result. Then the truth dawned on me. Why was the panel so thick? I tore off the leather binding, and the panel divided and fell to the ground in a cloud of dust. There were two pictures. They had been nailed face to face. I leaned them against the wall, and the next moment I was leaning against it myself. Sorry, I'm starting to think maybe I should have gone to get my tea. I leaned them against the wall, and the next moment I was leaning against it myself. For one of the pictures was myself, a perfect portrait, no shade of expression or turn of feature wanting. Myself, in the dress men wore when James the First was king. When had this been done, and how, without my knowledge? Was it some whim of my aunt's? Lord, sir, the shrill surprise of Jane at my elbow. What a lovely photo it is. Was it a fancy ball, sir? So she means like a costume ball. Yes, I stammered. I don't think I want anything more now. You can go. Just say you don't. Why do you have to lie to the maid? Just say you don't know what it is. You can both think it's weird. That's fine. She went, and I turned, still with my heart beating violently, to the other picture. This was a beautiful woman's picture. Very beautiful she was. I noted all her beauties: straight nose, low brows, full lips, thin hands, large, deep, luminous eyes. She wore a black velvet gown. It was a 3/4 length portrait. Her arms rested on a table beside her, and her head on her hands. But her face was turned full forward, and her eyes met those of the spectator bewilderingly. On the table by her were compasses and shining instruments whose uses I did not know. Books, a goblet, a heap of papers and pens. I saw all this afterwards. I believe it was a quarter of an hour before I could turn my eyes from her. I had never seen any other eyes like hers. They appealed as a child or a dog's do. They commanded, as might those of an empress. She sounds pretty cool. I'm just going to say it. She sounds too cool for someone like you to have hold of the portrait, because you kind of seem like a bit of an ass. Shall I sweep up the dust, sir? Curiosity had brought Jane back. Oh, maybe I should go get my tea. Shall I sweep up the dust, sir? Curiosity had brought Jane back. I assented. I turned from her my portrait. I kept between her and the woman in the black velvet. That's weird. That's weird. This is really weird, dude. When I was alone again, I tore down The Trial of Lord William Russell, and I put the picture of the woman in its strong ebony frame. Then I wrote to a frame maker for a frame for my portrait. It had so long lived face to face with this beautiful witch, I wonder if that's foreshadowing, that I had not the heart to banish it from her presence. I suppose I am sentimental, if it be sentimental, to think about such things as that. I don't know if it's sentimental, but I feel like he's not nearly concerned about the fact, he's not nearly concerned enough, rather, about the fact that there is a portrait of him from the time of James the First in like perfect likeness, and he doesn't know where it came from, and he refuses to show the maid, who also doesn't know where it came from. Like, I feel like there should be more questions raised. I feel like in a similar position, I would reach out to some people and say, hey, any thoughts on what's going on with this? Is this just like a relative I should know about that I just happen to look uncannily like? Can we get to the bottom of this, please? Mind you, hindsight is always 20/20 in the horror genre, so who knows? The new frame came home, and I hung it opposite the fireplace. An exhaustive search among my aunt's papers showed no explanation of the portrait of myself, No history of the portrait of the woman with the wonderful eyes. Oh, okay, so he does look into it a little bit. Because, dude, you're a journalist. Come on, do some investigating. I almost said do some journalizing, but that's not the right word. I only learned that all the old furniture together had come to my aunt at the death of my great uncle, the head of the family, and I should have concluded that the resemblance was only a family one, if everyone who came in had not exclaimed that the pardon me, I'm going to try that sentence again. And I should have concluded that the resemblance was only a family one, if everyone who came in had not exclaimed at the speaking likeness I adopted Jane's fancy ball explanation instead. And there one might suppose the matter of the portraits ended. One might suppose, that is, if there were not evidently a good deal more written here about it. That's a bit meta, very good. However, to me then, the matter seemed ended. I went to see Mildred. I invited her and her mother to come and stay with me. I rather avoided glancing at the picture in the ebony frame. I could not forget nor remember, without singular emotion, the look in the eyes of that woman when mine first met them. I shrank from meeting that look again. That's weird. This is also kind of weird. Must be witchcraft. Normal people don't act like this. I reorganized the house somewhat, preparing for Mildred's visit. I brought down much of the old-fashioned furniture, and after a long day of arranging and rearranging, I sat down before the fire and, lying back in a pleasant languor, I idly raised my eyes to the picture of the woman. I met her dark, deep, hazel eyes, and once again my gaze was held, fixed as by strong magic. The kind of fascination that keeps one sometimes staring for whole minutes into one's own eyes in the glass. I gazed into her eyes and felt my own dilate, pricked with a smart like the smart of tears. I wish, I said, oh, how I wish you were a woman and not a picture. Oh, come down, oh, come down. I laughed at myself as I spoke, but even as I laughed, I held out my arms. I was not sleepy. I was not drunk. Okay, this bodes well. I was wide awake and as sober as ever was a man in the world, and yet, as I held out my arms, I saw the eyes of the picture dilate, her lips tremble. If I were to be hanged for saying it, it is true. Her hands moved slightly, and a sort of flicker of a smile passed over her face. I sprang to my feet. This won't do, I said aloud. Firelight does play strange tricks. I'll have the lamp. I made for the bell. My hand was on it when I heard a sound behind me and turned, the bell still unrung. The fire had burned low, and the corners of the room were deeply shadowed. But surely there, behind the tall worked chair, was something darker than a shadow. I must face this out, I said, or I shall never be able to face myself again. I left the bell. I seized the poker and battered the dull coals to a blaze. Then I stepped back resolutely and looked at the picture. The ebony frame was empty. From the shadows of the worked chair came a soft rustle, and out of the shadow the woman of the picture was coming towards me. I hope I shall never again know a moment of terror as blank and absolute. I could not have moved or spoken to save my life. Either all the known laws of nature were nothing, or I was mad. I stood trembling, but I am thankful to remember. I stood still while the black velvet gown swept across the hearthrug towards me. Next moment, a hand touched me. A hand soft, warm, and human. And a low voice said, "You called me. I am here." And I think that is where we shall leave it for the first half of the Ebony portrait. Thank you for hanging out with me and listening to the first half of the story. As usual, please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed. If you also have a suggestion, just drop it in the comments below. And I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well, and that we can hang out again together soon, very shortly. Goodbye, folks.